the dishonesty that has existed is that we somehow led people to believe that.
Efetivamente, o que verificamos é que o acordo que os norte-americanos colocaram sobre a mesa não agrada a Kiev, ponto, não é? Portanto, depois o Ministro dos Estrangeiros, André Sibila, vem com este, digamos, com esta narrativa, com esta justificação, dizendo que vai procurar um acordo melhor, porque politicamente a Ucrânia não aceita este acordo. O Poroshenko hoje veio também a terreiro a dizer que é necessário revê-lo, que este acordo é prejudicial, nomeadamente, à integração da Ucrânia na União Europeia. Portanto, o que verificamos, efetivamente, é que ambas as partes, com quem os norte-americanos estão a procurar negociar um cessar-fogo, não estão satisfeitas com, digamos, os termos em que o assunto está a ser colocado.
Bem, em primeiro lugar, dizer que não há negociações. As negociações tiveram o seu momento e não produziram nada de significativo, nada de conclusivo, porque não há nem acordo relativamente à iniciativa do Mar Negro, nem há acordo relativamente à questão do cessar-fogo às instalações energéticas. Da parte da Rússia, Putin disse logo que não iria atacar mais instalações energéticas. O que temos assistido da parte ucraniana, todos os dias, até ao dia de ontem, houve ataques a instalações energéticas. Pois eu penso que o presidente Trump e a sua equipa tinham uma abordagem extremamente ligeira e superficial sobre a complexidade deste assunto. Não é por acaso que Marco Rubio vem dizer, pois, ainda é muito cedo para termos negociações, as condições não estão maduras, portanto teremos que deixar isto para outro momento, e por outro lado tivemos também outros comentários de Marco Rubio relativamente ao que está a acontecer. Portanto, havia uma série de expectativas infundadas, e o que nós estamos a verificar agora é que este assunto não vai ser resolvido agora, não vai ser resolvido até 20 de abril e não sabemos quando é que vai terminar. Só terminará quando existir um impasse doloroso, e isso terá que haver uma acomodação dos interesses objetivos, dos interesses estratégicos de cada uma das fações. Depois de ouvirmos o Sr. Putin e ouvirmos o Sr. Zelensky a falar, percebemos imediatamente que não há aqui qualquer acomodação. O Sr. Zelensky continua a falar numa paz justa, leia-se, expulsar as forças russas do território ucraniano, e o Sr. Putin diz que o seu objetivo é manter na sua posse os territórios que nesta altura controla. E é por aí que vamos.
Quem tem dinâmica militar positiva tem sempre a capacidade de influenciar a mesa negocial, e isso eu acho que é um ponto que nós ainda na Europa não conseguimos digerir plenamente. Ou seja, quem tem a vantagem militar sempre condicionou as negociações. Basta ver o que aconteceu na guerra da Bósnia-Herzegovina, e a verdade é que os sérvios, porque tinham vantagem no terreno, tiveram vantagem no processo de Dayton, e portanto começa aí o tipo de negociação que estamos aqui a ver também. Nestas negociações em particular, havia a capacidade de ter trazido a Rússia para uma acomodação maior se os Estados Unidos tivessem conseguido dar garantias de que a Rússia conseguia exportar os fertilizantes pelo Mar Negro. Porque a Rússia já esteve num acordo similar em 2022 e não conseguiu exportar os fertilizantes, fez disso denúncia várias vezes, a denúncia foi ignorada várias vezes, e é óbvio que nesta fase a Rússia não confia se não tiver garantias sérias de que vai conseguir exportar os fertilizantes. E para isso era preciso também que os europeus quisessem entrar num jogo negocial de forma séria e não apenas neste choradinho de que querem estar na mesa, mas sem ter depois uma visão concreta daquilo que está a acontecer. Agora, parece-me evidente que, enquanto não houver aquilo que dizia o Sr. Major-General, o impasse doloroso, e enquanto não houver do lado da Rússia a percepção de que há mais vantagem em negociar do que em manter a guerra, então ela vai se manter para já, porque a verdade é que militarmente a dinâmica é neste momento bastante favorável a Moscovo, e diplomaticamente não há nada que seja disruptivo o suficiente para se tornar atrativo o suficiente para trazer a Rússia para a mesa negocial.
Jeffrey Sachs, economist, academic and public policy analyst. Welcome to the global program of IRTV.
Thank you so much.
I have the impression that your position about the war and the issue of responsibility goes against the mainstream narrative of the Western countries. So what is your position about could the war have been avoided and who has the responsibility?
Of course, there was no cause for this war or need for this war other than bad mistakes, especially by the United States government. Starting in 1992, when the Soviet Union dissolved at the end of 1991, the U.S. entered a realm of arrogance, which is truly epical. And the idea that these leaders had in 1992 was now the U.S. is the world's sole superpower. It can do what it wants. Recently, a leading historian told me that he has found in the archives the plans for NATO enlargement in 1992 already, including Ukraine. So they already had the idea from the very beginning that NATO would enlarge and it would just keep expanding the U.S. military empire or the U.S. military alliance. At the same time, publicly, they had just told Gorbachev, not 1 inch eastward. But the arrogance is the essence of it, which is the U.S. is the sole superpower. Our late Secretary of State under Clinton, Madeleine Albright, said we're the indispensable country. It's quite a position for a country that has 4.1% of the world population. It's a little bit arrogant. But the U.S. started the NATO enlargement. Russia said no. The U.S. had the first wave, including Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic. I think that wasn't so sensitive for Russia because these are countries far away, and the reason of the Soviet occupation had to do with World War II. It was a past. But then George W. Bush Jr., who started wars all over the place, also expanded NATO to 7 more countries. The 3 Baltic states, Romania, Bulgaria, Slovakia, and Slovenia. And Russia said, stop, you're right on our borders. You're on the Black Sea, you're in the Baltic states. And in 2007, of course, Putin gave a famous speech at the Munich Security Conference where he said, you lied to us about NATO expansion, you keep doing it, you've got to stop. What did the United States do? Oh, it listened so well always. Next year, we expand further to Ukraine and to Georgia. And to my mind, adding in Georgia is really the ultimate clue, because not that it's so hard to understand any of this, but Georgia, not exactly a North Atlantic state to begin with, on the other side of the Black Sea, in the Caucasus. But what was the U.S. program? The U.S. program was to surround Russia in the Black Sea. This is an old idea. It actually goes back to the Crimean War, of the idea of France and Britain surround Russia in the Black Sea. So it's an old idea, but the U.S. idea was that NATO would be in Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, and Georgia, completely surrounding Sevastopol, completely surrounding the naval fleet, making Russia, a nothing in terms of the Eastern Mediterranean, the Middle East, and so forth. Russia understood all of that. And in 2008, Putin told Bush at the Bucharest summit, don't do this. This could be disaster. And, by the way, the U.S. ambassador to Russia at the time, William Burns, a person we know today as the head of the CIA, wrote a memo which, of course, as in so many things in the United States, was secret. Don't let the American people know this, but it was leaked by WikiLeaks. And the title of the memo, Niet, means Niet. And the whole memo was to say, the Ukraine membership in NATO is at the deepest pain of Russia. It is the reddest of red lines. Don't do this. So Burns got that then. He gets that now, 15 years ago. but the United States doesn't listen. And then Viktor Yanukovych was elected 2010. His policy, very smart, by the way, neutrality. We're between two giants, so we need to keep the balance. But the Western giant didn't want to wait. It kept pushing, pushing, pushing. Then all of the protests at the end of 2013, and then Victoria Nuland, who was then our Assistant Secretary of State, gets on the phone to the U.S. ambassador and dictates who the post-Yanukovych government will be. Incredible. U.S. covertly overthrowing a government, or at least participating in the overthrow. The day that Yanukovych flees, when the government offices are violently stormed, there's the EU and the US ready that day to recognize the new government. Not to say Yanukovych is still president, we need peace, he should come back, we should have elections, all the things that were agreed. No, the first moment we recognize the new government. That's what a covert operation to overthrow a government is all about. So that was the beginning of the war in February 2014. And then Putin pushed. He took Crimea as he told Bush he would in this event, and he pushed for an agreement that would at least recognize the autonomy of the eastern Ukrainians, the Donbas region. And what's amazing there also is the Europeans were the guarantors of that. There comes Chancellor Merkel. This is France, Sarkozy and Merkel. We guarantee this. And the Ukrainians, they say it publicly. They said it to me privately. We have no intention of honoring this thing. And it's all a joke. Oh, it's all a joke. Yeah, it's a bad agreement. We're not going to honor it. And so we say the Russians, they don't do diplomacy. We do diplomacy, and then we ignore it. The Minsk II was actually backed by a unanimous vote of the UN Security Council. Never mentioned. In the US mainstream media, you wouldn't find a word of it because it's just propaganda pages right now. You have no background, no history, just complete amnesia. Then 2021, Biden came in, and he was even more antagonistic and more militaristic, more hardline, more neocon, as we say. 3 times in 2021, Biden, at a high level, said Ukraine will become member of NATO. So this is the provocation. At the end of 2021, Putin put on the table a draft U.S.-Russia security arrangement, December 17, and the main clause of it was no more NATO enlargement. I called the White House at the end of 2021, spoke to a very senior official and said, negotiate, avoid the war. You can avoid this war. No, Mr. Sachs, NATO is non-negotiable. And that's what they told Putin. You can read the minutes of the Russian Security Council meeting, February 21st, 2022. You can look at Putin's speech, February 21st, 2022, to the nation. He says, we tried to negotiate, but there was no one that wants to negotiate. You can argue, did he have other things he could have done and so forth, and absolutely valid arguments. But the main point is the United States, for 30 years, has pushed one line. We go where we want, when we want, where we want, and no one can tell us any different, including Russia. And you end up in war with that attitude. And then what's shocking to me, again, completely undiscussed in the United States, probably you couldn't find 2 articles trying to understand it. Zelensky said as early March, just a couple weeks after the invasion, we'll go neutral. And I spoke to senior diplomats that were all around that, very interesting. As soon as he said that, Ukrainians and Russians started to exchange papers. And actually, Putin said, negotiate. And there was draft agreement that was being mediated by Turkish Foreign Ministry. And I spoke to people that were involved in that. They were nearing completion of an agreement. And then the United States blocked it. They don't want peace. We need to weaken Russia. We need to defeat Russia on the battlefield. We need to expand NATO. This attitude is absolutely threatening to get us all killed, which is why I resent it so deeply. Because what do they think? That Ukraine's going to win in this counteroffensive and Russia's just going to sit there and say, oh, you're right, so sorry, we're going to go home, we're defeated, Ukraine's defeated us. Or Russia's going to say, we're going to escalate. And my belief is that they would, with good chance, escalate, and this could be complete disaster. And I don't think the NATO side, I'm speaking about the White House and the U.S. because it's basically been calling the shots on this. I don't think they've thought through this. So what happens? Escalation, 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 and then suddenly Putin says, okay, we stop, we fold, or we go to nukes. And it's absolutely a real prospect. And then we're told in the U.S. media, don't listen to Sachs saying about nukes. That's just scaring. That's nuclear blackmail. Well, the whole point is it's a real possibility. It's not about blackmail. It's about prudence, that you don't push your adversary to use nuclear weapons. That's the principle. And they don't adopt that principle yet.
Mr. Sachs, you, in a recent interview, you said that the Hungarian Prime Minister is the only European leader who has a realistic approach of the war. But the Hungarian Prime Minister, Mr. Viktor Orbán, seems to be very lonely with this opinion. And he's often accused to be a Russian asset or a puppet of Moscow or an agent of Putin. Why the Hungarian Prime Minister is so lonely with this realistic approach of the war?
I don't really understand why the European leaders who know better won't say better. Prime Minister Orbán says it, and he's right. And I know some others believe it, but won't say it. And I've watched even close up some of them. They say privately to me, yes, yes, we know NATO's really a problem, and then publicly, completely the opposite. Or they say it publicly, and then they're smacked by the White House, and oh, no, we didn't mean that. We really meant we love every word you say, United States. So there's a lot of feeling that you just have to toe the U.S. line. I think, especially, okay, I can even understand psychologically, maybe the Baltic states, how they view this, or Poland, although I don't think they view it accurately, but how they view it psychologically, understandable. But I know, all the way back 15 years ago, in 2008 at the Bucharest summit, leaders then said to me, Jeff, what is your president doing pushing NATO enlargement? They knew. They said, and by the way, some of those now say exactly the opposite of what they told me to my ear. We were on the phone then. So I think Prime Minister Orbán is brave. He's saying the truth. He's hoping that the truth will make a difference and that some of the others who know better but are not saying better will think a little bit more. And I hope, frankly, President Erdogan also will be clear. I don't think anyone understands the Black Sea issues and the path to safety probably more than Erdogan. That's their place. Turkey and Russia have been at it for a long time. They've seen all of this for hundreds of years. And that's why the Turks were so effective in the mediation. So maybe Prime Minister Orban and President Erdogan and a few others, it wouldn't take many to say clearly inside NATO, come on, could we think a little bit before we just continue down this mindless, automatic path that is leading to Ukraine's destruction and threatening the world. And to my mind, this is the real thing. Outside of the NATO discussion, there's a whole world of leaders that agrees, which is very important. President Lula, for example, very vocally, very clearly. President Xi, no question. China understands, and China's, it's not a peace plan, but China's peace proposal says very clearly, we need an agreement that recognizes the security interests of both parties. What does that mean? It means stop the NATO enlargement so that both parties can find a path to security. Perfectly sensible. India understands, what are we doing? Wrecking the whole world over this phony principle of NATO's right to expand. African Union understands this. So the interesting thing is if you add up the populations of the countries where the leaders get it, I'd say it's at least 3/4 of the world. Inside NATO, it's very few. Prime Minister Orban's really exceptional because not only does he get it completely clearly, but he says the truth also, and which is very painful to do when all the others, even when they get it, are not ready to say the truth. And so this is the situation that we face. And the media have become, in the United States, the mainstream media, hopeless because there's no background provided to the readers at all. And I had a run-in with the New York Times on this because they keep saying the invasion was unprovoked, unprovoked, unprovoked. And I had an assistant of mine scan all their editorials and op-eds since the February 24th, 2022 invasion. And they wrote in 26 articles, unprovoked invasion. And I said, could you once let someone explain the other side? And so far, no.